Hello, everyone. I'm Paula Harvey from Tejon Conservancy, and this is our fourth lesson, lesson 4, Compare and Contrast. In this lesson, you're going to study two kinds of one thing that are very similar, such as two shells, two feathers, two leaves from similar plants. For example, they could be two leaves from two different kinds of oak trees, or even two kinds of fruit, but make sure your fruit are very similar, like citrus fruit. So it could be an orange and a lemon. It could be a fruit like a peach and its relative, a nectarine. Or you could do an animal like two different kinds of beetles. You get to choose the subject that you're going to study today. So what do we mean by compare and contrast? This is really important. This will help you in all of your classes and whenever you take a test. If you're asked to compare two things, you need to tell how those two things are alike. If you're asked to contrast those two things, you need to tell how they are different. Now, this is so important that I want you to memorize this. Compare, show how they are the same. Contrast, show how they are different. What's the tool that we use when we're trying to diagram compare and contrast? The Venn diagram. I'm sure you're all very familiar with this. It's two circles that overlap each other, and on each side are the different individual characteristics of the two things you're comparing. In the middle is what they have that's alike. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to model the journal entry that you're about to do. Then you're going to select your own subject and journal it, and then you're going to send it to your teacher. As in lesson 3, you're going to answer questions at the end, and that'll be your reflection. So I decided that in my garden, I have two different kinds of mint growing. I drink mint tea in the winter. So one of these mint plants is the one I'm going to want to harvest and dry out to preserve for winter. The other one, I don't think I'll want to use. So I want to compare and contrast them to determine which one I'm going to use. So, quick reminder, when you're journaling, you start with your metadata. Head your journal with the date, the day, the time, the weather. Is there wind? What's the mile per hour? Temperature, you might have to estimate what that is. Is there cloud cover? And then you're going to go ahead and choose what you're going to study. As you're doing this, let me give you a little hint. If your subject's small enough, trace it. If it's flat. If it's a shell, you may not be able to trace it. You might be able to, depends on the shell. But for a leaf, that's very easy because you can trace it. Don't trace your beetle if you're going to do beetles. You're going to sketch that. And then also, wherever it is you've decided you're going to put your Venn diagram, put that into your journal entry right now before you even begin, so that you'll have that space. You won't have forgotten it. Okay, remember what you're going to put in your journal entry. You're going to start by self-talk. So you're going to talk about the two things, the two very similar things that you are comparing and contrasting. I notice, I wonder, this reminds me of. And then you're going to write them down. And as you're writing them down, remember that you're going to repeat it. So it's not just one thing that you notice, but all the things you notice. It's not just one thing that you wonder, but all the questions that you have. And anything that it reminds you of, write those things down. Okay, then fill in your Venn diagram at the same time you're writing your I notice, I wonder, this reminds me of. So if you notice, for example, that one of my leaves is fuzzy and the other one is not, I could put that in the Venn diagram. The one, leaf number 1 is fuzzy, leaf number 2 is not fuzzy. So I'm also writing I notice, I wonder, but I'm also putting that in the Venn diagram at the same time. And then Remember to do your metrics, your 1, 2, 3s, measuring, whatever you can do to measure as you're studying your two objects. Okay? Okay, so here I'm showing you what I did. I have my two leaves together and I use a ruler. I'm using the centimeter side of that ruler. This is a much better ruler than the last time. With the skull, I only had inches, but this one I have both inches and centimeters. So I'm measuring the length and the width of my leaves. And then another great tool if you're doing something small is to use your hand lens or your magnifying glass. So when you're using a hand lens or magnifying glass, you need to know that there's a proper way to do that. And that is you bring the magnifying glass or lens up to your eye, just like you would eyeglasses. They're right up next to your eye. Then you bring your object up to the lens until it is focused. When it's focused, that's as close as you can get to it. So I did that and look what I found on one of my leaves. I noticed are all of these small hairs growing on one of those leaves, but mostly they're growing along the veins. And I hadn't noticed that before. I knew it was fuzzy, but I didn't realize it was all along the veins. So that was a cool discovery of mine. So to finish up your journal entry, check the page over, make sure you have everything, make sure you've added I wonders, I noticed. It reminds me of as you were doing your journal entry, color it. So I didn't have to put a lot of color in. There are two different shades of green for these two different mint leaves. And then I put my title on the bottom, and I wasn't very creative. I just wrote compare and contrast. You might want to come up with a very clever title for your journal entry, and you can put it wherever you want on your journal. Remember, this is just the way I do mine. Don't copy the way I do it. Do it your way. This is your chance to show your individuality. And then don't forget to add this lesson and its title to your table of contents. All right, you're now ready to do your own compare and contrast study. You're about to pause this video. You'll go ahead and find two objects. Remember, they need to be very similar. And so I gave you a list of suggestions, but you can come up with anything you want, like an orange and a lemon or a peach and a nectarine. You would not compare an orange and a nectarine. They're too different. Two types of leaves, two six-legged insects, two seed pods from two different plants, two feathers, two shells, two rocks, whatever you want. Just make sure that they're similar but have enough differences that you can both compare, show how they are the same, and contrast, show how they're different. So now I want you to pause your video, go ahead and do your journal entry, come back, and then we'll work together on your reflection. Okay, welcome back. Let's do the reflection. Now, because the reflection is going to be another 6 questions plus your paragraph that you're going to do afterwards, why don't we turn the page and put it on its own separate page? Remember how to do it? And I'm going to walk you through it to remind you. First of all, answer every question in question-answer form. And then you're going to number your answers in the order in which you think it makes the most sense when you put it all together into a paragraph. And then you're going to add to that a topic sentence, the beginning sentence, and an ending sentence that ties everything together. Okay, so here's the first question, question 1, and also question 2. And these questions are addressing the next generation science standard cross-cutting concepts of patterns. So here's the question. And it's a complex question, so it's actually 3 questions in one. What are some patterns that you noticed? What features were similar and what features were different? And then the second question, why might those features be similar or different? So they're very much tied into each other. So the first one is, what are your observations? And the second one is I wonder. And so your answers could be those, could it be? Could it be similar because of the weather? Could it be different because they were found in 2 different locations? Okay, question answer form. Remember, use as many words in your answer as you found in your question. And the example I gave you before was, what state do you live in? And the answer in question answer form is, the state I live in is California. And so let me help you get started with the first question and put it into question answer form for you. Okay, what was the question? Was, what are some patterns you noticed? What features are similar and what features were different? Here's the answer. Some of the patterns I noticed were this and this. The features that were similar were this, and the features that were different were this and this. Now, I'm giving you 2 choices. You may have a whole lot more things that you found similar or different, or you may only find one thing that was similar or different. So you change that sentence up any way you like to cover the number of features and what were different and what were the same. Okay, the second set of questions are the Next Generation Science Standards cross-cutting concepts of cause and effect. You try saying that. Cross-cutting concepts of cause and effect. So look back at your journal page and focus on the differences between the 2 subjects. What are some possible causes for the differences that you observed? This again, it's, I wonder what happened here. And you're going to write those could it be? Maybe a reason was this, or maybe a reason was that. So you're going to make it a complex answer to give a couple of different ideas of what might have caused those differences. Then question number 4 for cause and effect. What might have caused any of the patterns you observed? Going back to the first set of questions, what those patterns were, what might have caused those patterns? Example. When we look back in lesson 3, some of the plants that we looked at had some brown spots and some holes in them. So you might have said, well, the patterns of those brown spots might have been a fungus or an infection, or the holes may have been an insect that was walking around, and as it walked around, it was chewing on the leaf. All right, and then the next set of questions, those cross-cutting concepts are structure and function. So number 5, what were some of the differences you observed? How were the structures, like leaves, bark, branches, whatever it was you're observing, different from one another? So how were they different? And then how might these structures function differently? So why would there be, on my mint plant, why did one of those plants have little tiny hairs on it? The other plant didn't. Why would they function? Why would one plant need it, the other wouldn't? What was the function of those? All right. Then take those answers, put them in the order in which you want to write that paragraph. Start with a topic sentence, something sort of like, in this lesson, I was comparing and contrasting 2 leaves. For me, it was 2 types of mint plant. Notice, by the way, that I chose 2 mint plants, not 2 different kinds of leaves, but 2 plants that were the same mint, but of different species of the mint. All right, just so that you remember, you want these to be very close together. Start with that topic sentence, finish with that ending sentence. And don't forget, before you turn this paragraph and the journal entry in, look it over and proofread that paragraph for any mistakes that you might have made, because you'll get a better grade if your teacher isn't stumbling over mistakes that you missed. And that's it for lesson 4. I hope you had fun with it. I enjoyed teaching it to you. Bye for now. Look forward to seeing you in lesson 5. Bye.